Good morning, members. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public or press who've joined us today, either in person or watching via the live stream, to this meeting of the Environment and Green Investment Committee at Newshire Hall in Alconbury. The Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit, which is over there, and assemble in the car park. The closest fire escape is through the middle doors on my left. So we'll start with agenda item 1, which is notification of chair and vice chair. And Richenda, I'm wondering whether you could advise the meeting accordingly.
Of course, Chair. Council has appointed Councillor Lorna Dupre as the chair of the committee and Councillor Gay as the vice chair for the municipal year 2024-25.
Thank you very much indeed, Richenda. Item 2 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Again, Richenda, do we have any?
Apologies, Chair, from Councillor MacDonald, who is substituted by Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. And does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest on any item on the agenda, please? No, thank you very much. So we then move on to item 3, which is the minutes of our meeting on the 18th of April and the action log. So taking the minutes first, we're being asked to approve 2 sets of minutes for the meetings held on the 18th of April as a correct record. One is a confidential set of minutes. May I ask whether any member disagrees with the accuracy of the minutes? No. So we will take that as carried unanimously. Sorry, Councillor Gay.
Yeah, I couldn't actually find the sort of rump committee's minutes in the pack. Was that, or have I just missed it?
The confidential minutes, Emma.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to confirm, Councillor Gay, because they're confidential minutes, they were only sent to members on this committee that were a part of that confidential item in the afternoon. So that was received by email.
Thank you very much indeed. We now turn then to the minutes action log. There was one update to note, a briefing note on whether the council had considered using methane produced by landfill as a source of hydrogen for fuel was circulated to members in February. So that item is not ongoing. It is in fact complete. Other than that, do members or officers have any comments on the action log? No. Thank you very much indeed. We'll go on to petitions and public questions at item 4. There are no petitions this month, but we do have one public question. The question is from Mr. Darren Green, a local resident. Mr. Green, you have up to 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. I'd like to start by highlighting 3 facts. First, the natural world is in crisis. Although this summer in the UK has been mild, global temperatures continue to break records. 2023 was the warmest year since global records began in 1850, and it seems likely that 2024 will be hotter still. The continued increase in global temperature is already threatening ecosystems and human populations. The second fact is that Cambridgeshire Council recognises the urgency of this crisis in their climate strategy plan. In the plan, the council declares its intention to show local leadership to tackle climate crisis in Cambridgeshire. The third fact I'd like to highlight is that food and drink we consume is a huge part of the environmental picture. According to the United Nations, around 1/3 of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions is linked to food. Of this, food that comes from animals has an especially large impact. As the BBC puts it, even the most climate-friendly meat options still produce more greenhouse gases than vegetarian protein sources like beans or nuts. According to research by the University of Oxford, changing what we eat is one of the biggest ways we can reduce our impact on the planet. So with these facts in mind, I'd like to ask the committee to consider recommending that the council adopt a 100% plant-based internal catering policy in line with their climate strategy plan. I recognise that the council probably does not provide much internal catering, but this is still a really important message to send about the direction that institutions need to take towards a just and sustainable food system. The National Food Strategy published in 2021 recommends a transition towards more plant-based eating, and it is, in my opinion, important that the council leads by example on this. If the council committed to a fully plant-based catering for its own food, this would send a powerful message to other institutions. Other councils in the country have already made this step. As you may be aware, a plant-based motion was passed by Cambridge City in 2022. Earlier this summer, the Cabinet of Calderdale Council in West Yorkshire recommended a plant-based food policy for its internal catering. The council leader there talked about the decision as one of collective responsibility for the future. I think a commitment to plant-based catering would be an important act of leadership by the council and urge this committee to recommend such a move. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Green, for your very interesting question. We will be considering, as we do on an annual basis, the council and Cambridgeshire's carbon footprint later on in the year, and we will clearly want to consider this in the light of that ongoing review of our impact on the climate. So we will provide a written response to you within 10 days of this meeting and give you a full response at that point. Thank you. The next item, item 5, is the proposed uplift in framework value for REFIT 3. This is a key decision and it will be presented by the Head of Energy Services, Ethna George, who is with us today. Over to you, Ethna, to introduce this.
Thanks very much, Councillor Dupre. The paper we've brought today to do with the energy projects is largely a procedural one to do with the public contract regulations 2015, which we reference in the paper. A number of the energy projects that the council has undertaken were procured under a REFIT 3 framework. And we've set out the sort of timeline under which this happened, but I'll just draw your attention to that in just a moment. What we're seeking to do, and we would like committee to consider, is uplifting or increasing the target value of projects under the public contract regulations, which are referenced in paragraph 3.6. So just to give you the brief potted history so that hopefully it all is clear. REFIT 3 was a framework developed back in March, or released back in March 2016 by the Greater London Authority and their partners. In November 2017, Cambridgeshire County Council ran a mini competition under that and awarded the contract to what was known as Bouygues, then now known as Equans. And at that point in 2017, a target value of projects expected to come through under that mini competition was set at 50 million. As you'll see from table 3.1 in the document, the actual number of projects and when their sort of final business case approvals were set at committee range from about 2020 to 2021. So quite a time after that target value was set, and obviously no one had a firm idea of which projects would come forward and what their final values will be. What we've seen happen since is that the construction industry has gone through a fairly unparalleled series of events and turbulence in terms of labour, access to labour and labour costs, and also material prices, and that has affected some of the projects. We're not here obviously to seek any uplifts on any budgets. All of those for those projects have been done separately at committee previously. But it has meant that we now know that we will exceed that target of 50 million under this framework, and that is procedurally allowed and permissible as long as we seek committee's approval to uplift that target level. Under the regulations, we can go up to 50% higher. And because it involves coming to committee to do that, we considered various different options about what level to come back with, but we decided that for ease, we would go with the maximum 50% just to avoid any problems in the future and any need to come back to committee. So those are the key aspects under that, and that's what we're seeking today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ethna. Do members have any questions for Ethna on the contents of her report? Andrew, Councillor Wood.
I would ask, based on the fact that I can totally understand why you would go for the maximum in this case, but I'd just ask realistically, what would you estimate the actual increased cost to be?
So if you look at table 3.1 in the paper, we're forecasting that in the final column, the forecast total expenditure under the framework for the projects, and we can't add any additional projects to this, obviously, the framework has since closed, will be around 59,317,000. It could possibly go very slightly higher than that. We hope not. We're obviously doing everything we can to manage the costs and ensure that doesn't happen, but that is what we're anticipating.
Thank you very much. Obviously, the ongoing expenditure on this will be monitored, as will risks and other factors, by the Green Investment and Utilities Advisory Group and ultimately by this committee as well. So yes, it's our job to monitor that. It's the job of the opposition to hold us to account on that. So yeah, that's the way it is. Councillor Coates.
I think you've just answered my question, actually, Councillor Dupre, but just to clarify, absolutely, we're not authorising additional spend on any individual projects. We're simply authorising the framework's limit. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
Councillor Tierney, and then sorry, I'm having a complete mental blank, and I know your name all too well, but I'm just sorry. You put your hand up. I'm sorry.
Smith.
I've just had a complete mental blank. Yes.
Oh, right. Sorry.
After Councillor Tierney, I was going to call.
Okay.
Mandy, of course, Councillor Smith. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that the reason that these budgets have to come back to committee is to provide oversight on them, to make sure that they don't just become a target rather than the spend. Not suggesting that's what's going to happen, but I'm uncomfortable with you just going with the maximum amount. I do think you should have to come back to committee, so I wouldn't support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tierney and Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. I may have missed it. Apologies if I have, and expanding a little bit on the point over there. So this extra 25 million, where does it physically come from?
So we're not asking for any additional capital for any of the projects. All the budgets have come to committee previously and been approved for all these projects under this framework. But under the procurement regulations, back in 2017, you could call it a guess, an estimate was made of how many projects might come through when we advertised the opportunity. We said there's a mini competition, who were on the framework, and there were 16 parties that were on the framework. Who would like to bid for this? We don't know what the projects are yet, but we estimate the value of those, projects, which some of which are in development, but not yet finalised, will be around 50 million. And so what we're saying here is that under the procurement regulations, if you spend over what is called a target, you have to treat that target like it's a cap. And therefore, we know that we're going to go over the 50 million, that the value of the projects and the number of projects we've brought through is likely to end up being around 59 million. And we just want to make sure that we don't fall foul of procurement regulations.
Thank you. If I may just sort of briefly ask, so this funding is external or internal?
So the projects have been funded, and this is obviously not about the budget for the projects right now. So the most of the budgets have come from borrowing, public loan board borrowing and also some external grants from the likes of European Regional Development Fund, for example. They're all developed on business cases that pay back within a certain amount of time from those funds. So they don't come from any central funds. But as I say, all of those budgets have been through committee scrutiny previously.
Thank you. Right, that's a bit clearer. Thank you for letting me come back. And just one more, just to clarify, because basically I probably don't understand it. So if we increase this by sort of the 25 million, does that have a knock-on effect of maybe more borrowing, more?
No. Sorry, apologies. Go on.
Sorry, no, that's just where you can see where I'm coming from. I have to ask these questions. Is there a knock-on effect then?
No, so this just means that the council won't be in a legally non-compliant position on procurement. It doesn't mean that a penny is being approved here or would be approved in future to allow us to go up. But it means that if we came in and said now, which we could do, and say the forecast is these projects will go to 59 million, we're going to come in and ask for it on the procurement side of it to go up to say 60 million, and it ended up being 60 million and £1, we would again have to come back with a paper like this to committee to seek your approval. So rightly or wrongly, we've just come in and said, can we just do this once? And it doesn't in any way prejudice any decision of any committee in the future to say no more borrowing for these projects or any decision in the future about the budgets of these projects.
Okay, does that help, Councillor Smith? Right, okay, thank you very much. Let me see, Councillor Counton, then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank officers for the correspondence I've had before today's meeting on some of the points that I raised, trying to get my head around that before today. One of which was about timing, because this was a 4-year programme started in 2017, and therefore, in my eyes, it's 3 years out of date. But that's been clarified for me. If you was on the programme in that 4 years, you can continue. So I was glad to read about that. I was also glad to ascertain that this wasn't actually an increase in funding or borrowing for these projects. That's separately elsewhere. I would say in the paperwork that I'm disappointed that so much of the uplift in funding required points at the international inflation, which is a fact. I'm not going to dispute that, but it's not the only reason these projects are off track, off budget, late, not delivering on time, and not delivering for the Cambridgeshire taxpayer. That's for a different time during this agenda, and has already been on the agenda at SRMP, and I'll be referring to that later on in today's discussions. However, the paper in front of it, I've just got one question before I decide. Right. So by passing this, it ensures compliance. At what point is the compliance trigger? Because we've already approved this committee and SRMP have already approved increased budgets. Is it when you issue the contracts that the figure is compliant or not? Is it when you pay the invoice, is the figure compliant or not? At what point did we risk falling out of compliance? Thank you.
So it's not a matter, the contracts stay as they are. Those are contracts that were signed on those projects quite a few years ago. And if we have any variations, they're dealt with as they come up. This is to do with ensuring that we don't get to a point where we have spent as a council the agreed budgets, the historically approved budgets, in excess of 50 million before this decision goes through. So what we're trying to do is ensure that the council had a target of 50 million expenditure. We've previously approved through other budgets the 59 million. We're currently, as you'll see from one of the columns in 3.1, the current expenditures, so the second to the right, shows you 48 million. 133,634,000. So what we need to do is approve this, or what we're hoping will happen is that you will approve the uplift on the procurement contract value so that we haven't spent more than 50 million before that is approved. And as you can see, we're getting quite close now. So arguably, we should have come forward to committee sooner. I'm sorry, it has taken us a little bit of time, but that's the key thing. It's about trying to ensure that the expenditure doesn't exceed this procurement target. Does that make sense? Sorry, the spend, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think you've encapsulated in your answer the risk that this council is now taking. So the figures you've quoted, which were £1.8 million short of the actual absolute cap at which we've become not non-compliant, were 30th of May 2024. And here we are in July. So I can't say with any certainty whether we've exceeded that 50 million or not. What I can say is it would have been more appropriate for this to be recognised earlier and brought in front of this committee earlier. One of the problems we have these days with these committees is meeting 4 times a year instead of the 12 months that we used to do under the old constitution, for the joint administration decided that it's okay to just have these massive gaps. I'm sure that could have been dealt with more speedily back then. I've got no more questions, but thank you for your answers.
If I could just come back on one of the points you made there, we have been monitoring this very carefully and we haven't exceeded the 50 million to date, but we acknowledge the tight time frame at our end. Absolutely, officers.
Yeah, but I think you've got to understand that this is a decision-making committee, and if for some reason there was some mistake and you didn't get your vote through today, that would scupper everything, put it in layman's terms. So yeah, this is high risk bringing it so late in the day. Thank you.
There was also, of course, the small matter of a general election, which threw a lot of committee meetings that were scheduled out of kilter. So we have other reasons as well by why meetings are being held as they were. Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Steve has actually raised before his comments about the number of meetings, the questions that I wanted to ask, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anybody else? No. Is there anything further to be said? I think we strayed into the debate somewhat there. If there's nothing more to be said, I will move to the vote then, and we're asked to approve an extension to the target value for the contract awarded under the REFIT 3 framework in November 2017 from 50 million to 75 million for energy performance contracting as detailed in paragraphs 3.5 and 3.6 of the report, and to delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee to authorise the extension of this contract. Can I see those in favour of that, please? Thank you. And can I see those against, please? That's 2. And any abstentions? None. Okay, that is carried by a significant majority. Thank you very much indeed, members, and thank you very much, Ethna, for the report. The next item, item 6, is the March Household Waste Recycling Centre redevelopment. This is also a key decision, and it will be presented by the Head of Service Waste Management Operational Delivery, Andrew Smith. So over to you to open the proceedings.
That's better. Hopefully you can hear me now. Thank you, Chair, and good morning to everybody this morning. You should have all received the report back, including the confidential item at Appendix 3. And in summary, this report gives an update on the March HRC project position and also includes details of the tender exercise and cost report, which indicates that capital costs will exceed the original capital allocation by £576,000. In usual circumstances, this report would come to the E&GI committee first before going to the SRMP committee on the financial aspects. However, owing to the general election, the E&GI committee was moved, which effectively put the 2 committee meetings out of order and meant the recommendations needed to reflect the fact that the SRMP would be considering the financial allocations first. Taking account of this circumstance, the committee is being asked to proceed with the build at this increased capital cost, based on the resolution to note the additional capital funding for this project that was made by the SRMP committee on Tuesday this week, 9th of July, under agenda item 6, the Integrated Finance Monitoring Report for the period ending 31st of May 24. The SRMP agenda item 6 report recommendation D was to note changes in grants and contributions and to agree capital budget changes, including funding from prudential borrowing where appropriate, as per section 4.5.2 of Annex A of that SRMP report, which included specific reference to the additional prudential borrowing of 0.576 million is requested for the March Household Recycling Centre for 25-26. In addition to the increased capital costs, approval is also being sought to submit an environmental permit application to the Environment Agency, which is required to operate the site. And for reference, permit applications are currently taking approximately 12 months to process by the Environment Agency. Approval of the recommendations, including the related delegations in this report, will allow the Council to deliver a new split-level site for use by the local and wider Cambridgeshire residents, which is why the report is seeking the following on the basis that the SRMP committee, which met on Tuesday this week, has noted and not approved the additional capex of 0.576 million. This wording is an officer error in this report, and if the committee is minded, recommend that this is changed before a decision is made. So to approve the preferred option to proceed with construction of the March HRC at the increased capital cost, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Environment and Green Infrastructure Committee to award and execute a contract to the successful design and build contractor as identified in Appendix 3, and delegate authority to the Executive Director of P&S in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the ENGI Committee to submit an environmental permits application to the Environment Agency. Chair, that completes my summary of this item.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Members need to note before we go any further that there is a confidential Appendix C to this report. If you wish to discuss the contents of that appendix, we will need to go into confidential session. I would like to discuss as much of this report as possible in public and certainly take the vote in public. Does anybody feel the need to discuss the detail of the confidential appendix? No, that is reassuring. Thank you very much. So questions now for Andrew, and Councillor Wilson has already indicated.
Well, first of all, as Andrew has mentioned, the Environment Agency, it's not shown on my register of interests because I am retired, but I used to work for the Environment Agency, although I had no dealings with waste or waste licensing. My question concerns page 39, where the comprehensive tender is provided. And I don't think this is related to the confidential appendices, but you can advise me if it is. It says the authority does not warrant the information contained within the technical information as correct or complete. So many of the providers are, as indicated here, undertaking their own checks. If those checks prove that there are additional services or unknowns, archaeological remains, is this going to significantly affect the charge, that costs of the projects that we are approving today?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Andrew, are you able to tackle that?
Certainly. Thank you very much for that question. There is an element in the costing report which factors in design risk and also contingency planning or funding for this project. And we've got £300,000 as a part of a risk pot, and there's a further £105,000 as part of the risk contingency.
So you're anticipating that that will cover this, exactly this sort of element, are you? Is that what
it's an unknown. Until you put the spade in the ground, you don't know what you're going to find. It is a greenfield site. But from the information that we received back from the tenderers, we believe at this stage that their costing is accurate for the project we want to deliver.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, when you're not speaking, could you switch the microphone off, because then that will train the camera onto the person who's actually speaking. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions for Andrew on this, please? No. Councillor Gardner, then Councillor Cant.
Sorry, that was I was indicating for comments. So.
Thank you very much, Chair. The question I've got, I think you may have answered it, but I'll just double check. So we're looking to increase the budget by 576k, but we're included within that, I think I've just heard from yourself, is that 405k is contingency costings. So in theory, if you you find nothing on the site that's a problem, that cost could be reduced by 405k. Is that correct?
Chair, in principle, yes, that would be correct. The reason for the contingency funding is to try and cover those unforeseen circumstances and also not have to come back to the committee for an additional £50,000 or whatever if we need to. So the contract will be monitored by ourselves and by our engaged contractor. And we'll also have milestones, within that to monitor budget progress. So we should be able to report, if everything was going to plan, that we have delivered the project either to budget or below budget.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Wood.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask, does this relocation fall in line or impact on any future reviews of our waste management PFIs?
The development is will be a council asset. It's built on council land. I think there's an item in the report pack that identifies this would be a reverting asset back to the council at the end of the PFI process, or indeed any other contracting position engaging an external contractor. So the important factor is this becomes a council asset, and it is being developed, for council use and the future certainty of delivery of waste services for the residents of Cambridgeshire.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm going to go on to debate, and Councillor Count has already indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report, and thank you for bringing that in front of this committee. It's unfortunate that the increase in costs. I do understand the reasons why. I'm just going to cap off quickly the matter of contingency that's been raised, and in my previous role in this council, that I think you're all aware of. It's something I got quite used to, that you have contingencies for risk, etc., and you often issue a statement to your potential contractors saying that we cannot guarantee all the information, even when you put in drill holes. If you take a project that we brought forward and completed, the King's Dyke, you put in some, or Ely Crossing, you put in some quite a large amount of drill holes to see what was underneath the surface, but you didn't actually say that guaranteed every single square inch of that land when the contractor goes on board. So you therefore have to have a contingency, which sometimes does or doesn't get used. So I think that's entirely appropriate. It'd be great if this does come back and say there's an underspend at the end of the day because contingencies weren't required. In my local knowledge, I don't think it's an overly complicated site, but we shall find out as we move along. I'd like to reflect as a local member that this is my division, which I share with Councillor French, and both of us are fully in support of this. The alternative option that's considered in 4.2 is the fact that we would lose a household recycling centre for March, and that would be an unbelievable loss for the people of March and the surrounding environments. I use it myself continually. I use that site, and it's a very well used and regulated site, but it's coming to the end of its use in December 24. I'm not sure that this one will be built in time, and I don't know how we'll cope with that. But I know that the County Council has plans around dates on that. So yeah, I just wanted this committee to be aware that the local members are fully in support of this project, and I don't have any conflict of interest because it's non-pecuniary. But yeah, we're up for this. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Count. Any more speakers on this topic? Not seeing anyone indicating, so we'll move to the recommendations. And the committee is recommended to note the recommendation to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee to note, rather than approve, as Andrew has corrected, the additional capital expenditure of £576,000, and subject to that approval, to approve the preferred option to proceed with construction of the March HRC at an increased capital cost as set out in section 3 of the report, to delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Environment and Green Investment Committee to award and execute a contract to the successful design and build contractor, and to delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Environment and Green Investment Committee to submit an application to the Environment Agency for the necessary environmental permit. for this site. Can I see all those in favour of that recommendation, please? That is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members, and thank you, Andrew. The next item is the Finance Monitoring Report Outturn 2023-24, which will be presented by the Strategic Finance Manager, Sarah Haywood. Sarah should be appearing online shortly, I hope. Yes, here we are. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. So the first of my two reports is the Outturn report for the last financial year, 2023-24. The actual outturn position across the whole of P&S was a 4 million overspend. In February, you'll remember that the forecast was a 1.8 million overspend, but during March, the waste position was reviewed, and it was decided that the previous forecast of 800k of operational savings from the plants being closed would not be accrued, and instead would be addressed as the part of the contractual change negotiations. So that was one element of the change in waste. But then also there was a review of the capital revenue spend, which was on the BATC feasibility work. And it was identified that 1.2 million of the capital expenditure would more appropriately be charged to revenue. And so then that was moved across to revenue, creating a pressure. So this created a 2.2 million change in the position, and hence at year end, there was a 4 million overspend. On the capital side, across P&S as a whole, there was 13.2 million slippage in excess of the capital programme variation. And the May FMR, which is the next report on the agenda, details the capital carry forwards and resultant reprofiling. That's all I was going to say as an introduction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. Are there any questions for Sarah, please? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I think I just missed it. You said there was a capital carryover. What of?
There is assumed capital slippage, which is the capital programme variation, and that's the budget is about. And in excess of that there was another 13.2 million across the whole of P&S.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sarah? No. Any debate on this? Councillor Count.
Yeah, I think that the this committee is well aware of the cost overruns on energy projects, which has cost this council millions and millions and millions. There's also contained in this bookwork the fact that over £5 million in revenue has been lost in energy generation because they're late and out of time. This has been raised repeatedly. It's been raised at both the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee and here. I just want to let this committee know what happened at the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee this week. We previously asked for a deep dive into these projects to discover exactly what's going on. We know that things like inflation greatly affected things. We do realise that there were issues perhaps around the COVID period, etc., etc. But the response we got at the previous SRMP committee meeting was that a deep dive report had been produced and presented to the E&GI committee meeting. And so at this meeting, in our minutes here, we were circulated the report that went to E&GI as the completed deep dive into why these energy projects continually go over time and over budget. And so we had an opportunity to read there at SRMP what had been presented here, and the final conclusion of that report, and I'm going to simplify it as much as possible, was these projects are complicated. Therefore, if we add more time and money at the start, we'll be okay. Now, I know that's an oversimplification, but that was the conclusion of that report. I responded to officers when I received that as a deep dive that I didn't feel that that was a satisfactory deep dive into the as a conclusion, which meant either that people hadn't interrogated what had happened sufficiently and or they could back up their claims, or that the actual findings, internal findings, were not disclosed to this committee. On the basis of that comment and my comments at SRMP this week, the Section 151 officer did confirm that this is going to be looked at again with a new focus as to what is actually going on and to come back. That may come back with the same conclusion that these were set up wrong, or there wasn't, you know, with that burst of inflation, that perhaps more time and more money is the only answer. But because that wasn't backed up with documentation and facts in that original report, there is going to be a second deep dive looked into this, confirmed by a Section 151 officer. I don't know what the outcome of that is going to be, and I'm not going to predict what the outcome of that is going to be, but I do think, considering the vast sums involved that we're off target by, both in delivery and in terms of revenue generation, I think it's a task worth taking some time over to prepare us for if anything else comes forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Count. You will be aware, as all other members are, that a number of factors have impacted on this. There's firstly been the general economic situation, a combination of Brexit, the trust budget, the war in Ukraine, the inflation that has come from all of those, the rise in project costs for all sorts of construction activities. That has played a part. In addition, there has been the complexity of these projects and also the innovative nature of these projects. We knew that some of these were innovative projects when we took them on, and we took them on unanimously under the previous administration in some cases, because we believed that they were worth doing and they were valuable as demonstrator projects and as new ways of tackling the important issues of climate change, which many, though I know not all, of us believe is an important matter. The third aspect, though, is the condition in which these projects were left and bequeathed to us. And we have spent, and our officers in particular, have spent inordinate amounts of time trying to rectify some of the issues that were left to us. Those have been considered in confidential session because they are not matters that are open to the public for good reason. And therefore that has been an added pressure on this authority to try to get these projects delivered. All of those have made this difficult, but just because something is difficult does not mean it should not be done. Furthermore, we have sought very hard to make sure that these projects have been well scrutinised. Your group, Councillor Count, has representation, as do all the other groups on this authority, on the Green Investment and Utilities Advisory Group, which meets monthly to go through the detail of these energy projects in extreme detail, and has in fact become a trailblazer section of this authority for how it analyses risk. All of that has been really useful work. Your group is represented on that group. If they're not talking to you about what is being said in that group, and you are not working with them to ask them what, tell them what they should be asking in that group, that's not something I can control. But please be aware that there are regular, indeed far more regular than this committee, opportunities for your group to interface with all of the work that is going on. And of course, the information comes, as it should, regularly to this committee on all of those issues. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this matter?
Chair, if I may just...
I will allow you briefly to come
You've left me confused. So are you saying you have all the information for why these are off track, costing us millions, and you're satisfied with the answers, and you don't welcome the Section 151 officer's deep dive that he's agreed to? Or are you agreeing that it would still be useful to look into things, even though you seem quite satisfied that you know all the answers? I'm confused what your position is on the deep dive that the Section 151 officer has agreed to undertake.
I'm sorry you're confused, because it's really quite simple. As I said, I welcome the opportunity for members of this authority to scrutinise what's going on. That is absolutely right and proper, and we have made every opportunity to make that opportunity available to all groups in this authority. Obviously, if there is more to learn, I welcome that as well. I don't have a problem with that. I don't see why I should, but I would encourage you, Councillor Count, to engage with your colleagues who are on the Green Investment and Utilities Advisory Group and see the work that has been going on there. Are there any other speakers on this? No? Okay, in that case, I will move to the recommendations. So we are asked to review and comment on the report. I think we have done that. I don't think we need to vote on whether we have done that, do we? I will if you like, but I don't think that's necessary. No, thank you. The next item is the Finance Monitoring Report for May 2024. And again, it will be presented by Sarah Hayward. So, Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, this is the first finance monitoring report produced for the new financial year. On the revenue side, across P&S as a whole, there is a 3.4 million forecast overspend. This is predominantly composed of two elements. The first is waste, where there's a pressure of 1.8 million, and that's due to the operational savings not being assumed as in the outturn report. And then also the fact that the decision will be later this year on the future contractual arrangements, and hence that the plant will not become operational again this financial year. And then the other pressure is on the energy project. So there's a 3 million forecast pressure. And the main factor is that the expected electricity income will be lower, there will be less income than as assumed in the business plan, because electricity prices, the wholesale electricity prices have reduced. And then there's also some income delays due to St Ives and Babraham Smart Energy projects. On the capital side, Appendix 3 is quite significant in this May FMR, because it reflects the carry forwards and reprofiling of budgets from last financial year. And these have actually already been reported to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee for approval. But the detail contained within that, you can see all the granular detail of the capital budget changes since the business plan was approved. Also, the additional budget for March HRC and Babraham Smart Energy Grid is identified within the report and was approved at Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. That's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. Are there any questions for Sarah on this report? Councillor Gay.
Yes, thanks very much, Sarah. I was just wondering whether we have any idea of the impact that will be felt when the likely rebasing of gas and electricity prices occurs. I think the plan is that electricity should be cheaper and gas should be more expensive, and that clearly will have a knock-on effect on the revenue that we get from the various solar projects that we have.
The report at the moment is the latest best estimate of what the impact will be. But when the actual contract is signed, it could be an improvement, it could be a worsening position. But this is the best estimate at the time being of what the contractual price will be and the pressure will be on the council.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Sarah? Any debate on this? No? Okay. So the recommendation is that we note the recommendation to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee to approve the capital carry forwards and reprofiling as detailed in Appendix 3 of the Finance Monitoring Report. We note the recommendation to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee to approve the additional capital budget and funding as detailed on paragraph 2.3 of the covering report, and we review and comment on the report as we have now done. Are members happy to agree those recommendations? Can I see those in favour, please? And that looks to me to be unanimous, I think. Any against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you very much indeed. So we move then to the final item, which is the agenda plan, training plan, appointments to outside bodies and internal advisory groups and panels, and it says the appointment of member champions, but I believe that our Democratic Services Officer may have something to say about that in her introduction.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As members know, this is a standard report which goes to each of the service committees at the beginning of each new municipal year. Yeah, I'm sorry, 2 corrections to note. The reference to member champions, obviously this committee does not appoint member champions, so that should be disregarded, please. And on outside bodies, the Little Paxton Quarry Liaison Group, it should of course refer to Councillor Prentice as a Labour member. There are no changes to the agenda or the training plan from the published papers, but I understand that the chair is proposing one change to the published appointments.
Thank you, Richenda. In reviewing the appointments, I would like to propose the replacement of myself on the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee with Councillor Coutts as the main member for the forthcoming year and myself as a substitute. I've chosen to make that arrangement because the meetings fall extremely inconveniently, and I do want us to continue to be strongly represented on a very important committee. So I'm proposing that change. Other than that, are there any questions or comments on this item? None? Are we happy to say that we've reviewed the agenda plan, the appointments and appointments to internal advisory groups and panels? Can I see those in favour of agreeing that we have done that? Any against? Sorry, Councillor Bradner, we're in the middle of a vote.
Sorry, I'm hesitating because I note that the appointments on page 112, the electronic page 112, it refers to Conservators of the River Cam, and I'm the current nominee to that body. But it refers correctly that it's a 3-year appointment, but it's out of date because it's referring to from January 2020 to the 31st of the 12th, 2022. And I was reappointed to the body, I think, during either this or last year. So it's just, it's always a bit confusing because the dates for this committee don't, or the council administration don't match up with the dates for the Conservators themselves. But can we just check that date afterwards, please?
Yes, I'm sure that's incorrect, and I'm sure I remember a reappointment in the period between 31st December 2022 and now. But yes, we will go back and correct and consider what's
since I'm currently the chair, that would be a bit tricky. So thank you.
Indeed. Okay. With that note, once again, are we happy to agree the recommendations? I think we all were. Yes, okay, so that looks unanimous. And at that point, I think we have therefore concluded the meeting. So thank you very much, members. Thank you, officers, and thank you to the members of the press and public who have attended our deliberations today. Thank you very much.